That bill the president signed yesterday dealing with the treatment and trial of detainees is now the law of the land, but it remains a subject of intense controversy. So what are critics saying the bill does, and what does the bill actually do? Chief White House correspondent Brett Baer reports.
Even after the president signed the Military Commissions Act into law Tuesday, it was still stirring controversy. Critics have said for months the system the law sets up is unfair and unconstitutional.
It would perpetuate the indefinite detention of hundreds of individuals against whom the government has brought no charges and present no evidence without any recourse to justice whatsoever.
This line of criticism continued even after the bill was signed into law.
What this means is that detainees who are locked up by the government cannot get to court to challenge the legality of their detention, even if they're innocent, even if the government made a mistake.
But senior administration officials say these statements are just flat wrong. They say it's all laid out in the 38 pages of the new law. A detainee first goes through a process to determine his or her status. A U.S. military panel called a Combatant Status Review Tribunal determines if the detainee is a, quote, unlawful enemy combatant. The detainee has the right to challenge that status determination in federal court, specifically the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, considered the second most powerful court in the country. If the Court of Appeals upholds the tribunal's judgment, the detainee has the right to petition the most powerful court, the U.S. Supreme Court, to address the issue there. David Rivkin worked in the Reagan and first Bush administrations. He is now a United Nations human rights expert who has written extensively about the Military Commissions Act. He points out while detainees do not have the full judicial rights U.S. citizens have to challenge detention in U.S. courts, known as habeas corpus, under this law, contrary to the public statements of administration critics, detainees can challenge their detention.
The way it works is if you're properly classified as an enemy combatant, then your detention is appropriate. If you're not an enemy combatant, then obviously your detention is not appropriate, you should be released.
But the appeals don't stop there. If a detainee is tried in a military commission and is found guilty, the entire commission record is first reviewed by the convening authority. Then the detainee has the right to appeal the commission's verdict in front of a 3-judge panel sitting on a court of military commission review. If that panel upholds the conviction, the detainee has the right to appeal to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. And if that court also upholds the commission's verdict, the detainee can petition to be heard at the U.S. Supreme Court.
There's more due process and more involvement by the civilian courts than in any other situation in human history involving enemy combatants, and actually in some ways more than you would get as a U.S. serviceman who've been put for courts-martial, because you do have a shot at the Court of Appeals.
Detainee appeals built into what White House officials now call a misunderstood and mischaracterized law.
So Brett, so what's the view there of what will happen to this measure? Because you hear that it's going to be quickly challenged, and indeed it may already be challenged in the court, and will end up before the U.S. Supreme Court.
Well, Brett, there's a confidence here. Senior White House officials say they expect it to be challenged in court, but they believe if it ends up back at the U.S. Supreme Court, that the U.S. Supreme Court justices laid out all of their stipulations in the majority opinion back in June, essentially saying if Congress weighs in on this and lays out the guidelines and structure for these military commissions, that they are okay with them moving forward. They believe then it will be constitutional and will be upheld by the Supreme Court.
Brett, thank you. It is not common